Hello everyone, my name is B.Gates and welcome to my presentation on software requirement specifications. In this video, I will explain what a software requirement specification or SRS is and the contents that make up the SRS. A software requirement specification or SRS is a document used to detail the functional and non-functional requirements for a software product, define the software's capabilities and its performance, and provides the customer or stakeholders with details on how the software satisfies their requirements. The SRS is a controlled document used by the entire software development team to guide them throughout the software development process and ensure they are meeting those established requirements. If changes to software requirements are made, they will be recorded in this document as a new version. This ensures that if mistakes are made, an older version can be used to revert back to. The contents of an SRS include but are not limited to the items displayed in the image to the left or the text on the right. These just give a general idea of the information software teams use when developing the requirements for software. These contents include an introduction to the software, an overall description of the software, system requirements and features of the software, non-functional requirements of the software, any additional sections deemed necessary by the team, and finally the appendices. The Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, or IEEE, provide a template which is used by many organizations to help create a baseline for necessary information to put in an SRS. Now let's dive deeper into each of the sections shown here. The introduction portion of the SRS provides information such as the purpose, intended audience, the scope, and a general overview of what is contained in the SRS. The purpose portion briefly explains why the SRS is needed for the software being developed. The intended audience portion describes who should be reading and using the SRS. This usually includes people such as the software development team members, testers, customers or stakeholders, or anyone else the development team believes will benefit from reading the document. The scope portion of the introduction can mean different things depending on what the organization requires in the SRS. The scope could pertain to the scope of the SRS itself, which would be a description of the features of the SRS itself. It could also pertain to the scope of the actual software product, which would describe the overall goal of successfully developing the software. In other words, describing what the software product is supposed to do. The introduction might also contain a references portion pointing readers to any references used throughout the SRS. They can also be placed in an appendix at the end as well, whichever is acceptable for your organization. To the left, we can see the IEEE's template for the second section of an SRS. This is where the team provides a more detailed overview of the software's function and provides the audience with the diagram that helps illustrate what activities are supposed to occur when using the software. This section also contains each of the specific functions the software is supposed to accomplish. This list of functions is also backed up by adding a Unified Modeling Language or UML activity diagram to help illustrate what each of the listed functions accomplishes. The image on the right is an example of an activity diagram that illustrates the activities of each of the listed functions in a start to finish sequence with a few examples of the software functions. As you can see at the top right, the function examples state the student can enter eCampus software, the student can log into student services, and so on. You can follow each of those functions as they occur in the activity diagram. The constraints portion of this section details limitations to be considered that might affect software development. This might include operating environment limitations, meaning only certain software or certain operating systems can be used to operate the software. Next, time constraints might limit how much time can be used to develop software. Depending on what platform the software is being used on, it could also limit the type of language used to develop the software. And by language, I mean programming language. Hardware, memory, and standard requirements might also be constraints that limit software development. Assumptions are also added to this section. These could include any assumptions that, if not taken seriously, could cause issues during the software development process. The System Requirements and Features section of the SRS includes interface requirements and functional requirements for the software. Interface requirements include user, hardware, and software interface requirements. An interface is a tool used to interact with a component of a system. So a user interface is the tool used by the user to interact with the software. As shown in the SRS example on the left, user interface requirements include all the requirements the customer or stakeholder deems necessary for the user to be able to accomplish when operating the software. Hardware interface requirements are all the requirements deemed necessary for the software to interact with the hardware. This might specify whether the software can be run on a computer, a tablet, or another device. Software interface requirements might require that the software being developed interact and communicate with another software with no issues. The example in the SRS document above states that the course registration software must be able to interact with the university's already established eCampus software. Functional requirements are used to detail the required functions of the software along with the required behavior. This is where the functions listed in Section 2 are restated with additional details on how the system meets the functional requirement. Depicted in the image on the left, a stimulus and response sequence is used to represent how the software fulfills the functional requirement. A use case diagram, pictured on the right, is also used in this section. This diagram shows all the actors, things that trigger an action or require a response from the system, the behaviors associated with that trigger, and the flow of events for the software. As you can see on the image on the left, the functional requirement is to create a user. The stimulus is for the customer or instructor to click the Create User button in the course catalog software, and the response is that the system sends the customer or instructor a username to create a password. If you look at the image to the right, you can see the actors, the figures to the left that say customer, the figure to the right that says instructor, and you can follow their actions, and you can see the stimulus and response as well. The fourth section of the SRS is used to house the non-functional requirements of the software being developed. These non-functional requirements describe the qualitative requirements of the software's performance and other functions of the software. Performance requirements might state that a system needs to accommodate up to 100,000 users during peak hour periods. Download speeds might be another performance-based requirement for the software. Another example of a non-functional requirement might be security requirements, which might detail login and inactivity guidelines for the software. Quality requirements might include requirements for system downtime and advanced notification requirements to ensure users are warned of the downtime, or updates might be required to be released in segments, that way there are no downtimes for the users. The image displayed here provides some additional details on what non-functional requirements are and the difference between non-functional and functional requirements. Can you think of any additional non-functional requirements that might be required to put in software requirement specification? Please take a second to pause and comment below on any additional requirements that you can think of. The final portion of the SRS is where the appendix goes. Additional information that a software development team might deem useful is normally stored here. A glossary may be stored here along with additional UML diagrams and data dictionaries, like the ones shown here, that provide more insight on software requirements, each in their own appendix section. To summarize what a software requirement specification document is, it is a version-controlled document that details overall purpose and description of a software product. It details constraints and assumptions. It also details interface requirements. Functional and non-functional requirements are also added to this document, as well as an appendix that details additional information that will help the software development team throughout the software development process. Thank you for your time, And if you have any additional comments or questions, please feel free to add them below. Thank you.